Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel, and today this is a Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master tutorial. This is part 7, Wave Echo Cave, which is actually part 2 of Wave Echo Cave. There was a part 1, there is a part 2 to Wave Echo Cave, but this is lesson 7 for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Now, this lesson is designed primarily to deal with a lot of the different things you're going to contend with in Wave Echo Cave. It only covers half of the cave location. So we're going to be dealing with bugbears, zombies, the flaming skull, Mormisk the Wraith, the spectator. There's a doppelganger in here, some giant spiders, Nesna the black spider, Nundro Rockseeker, and just the general exploration of the area, how to defeat the monsters that are populating it. The primary goal is to rescue Gundren Rockseeker's brother, Nundro, and of course, claim the mine and defeat the black spider. Like all of the lessons on Lighthall that I run, it's about explaining how to do this, demonstrating where appropriate and where possible, and then allowing you a practice playthrough of Wave Echo Cave to ensure that you have some idea of what to do when that time arises. So this is the focus for today. That's what we're trying to do. You will also find that if you are interested in online resources, that if you go to the D&D Beyond website, you'll find a link and you can now access the Lost Mine of Phandelver for free. It costs you nothing. That means that gets you access to the entire adventure. All of the monster stat blocks will be free online as well. I know because I've just checked. And also you'll get access to the high resolution maps, which you can download, plus all the artwork that you can download. So you don't need to have a digital form of this on some sort of virtual tabletop if you're using a virtual tabletop. And if you're not using a virtual tabletop and you're just playing in person, then you'll be using Theatre of the Mind or Battle Maps or something like that. So that's the key thing I want to just point out for that. It's really, really good. I think that Wizards of the Coast has done a great job in making that available to so many people, considering that it hasn't been available to many people for a very, very long time unless they paid for it. And so the first location that we're going to contend with today is actually Area 11. This is the Northern Barracks. Now, Northern Barracks are in an odd spot. They're right here. And in this location, it stipulates there's 5 bugbears, which don't be thrown off by the image. This is not how compact it would be. This map is not to scale. So you don't need to worry about the fact that it is not to scale. Even it would be a much larger area, about twice the size of what you see here. So when the player characters reach this location, as always, paraphrase or read out the box text and ask the players what to do. There are some key things that will happen here no matter what they do, but the main thing to remember is ultimately they have to make a choice about how they approach or deal with this location. Like anything in their game, it's not about just you open a room and you kill stuff. It's more about how will I approach this. And this location is full of bugbears. And bugbears are intelligent creatures, which means that you can actually negotiate with them. You do not need to contend with the fact that they will just attack you on sight, because it's really the case. The best way to deal with this, and the best way for the player's characters to open up the barricaded eastern door, is to use a crowbar. So they should have a crowbar. There's crowbars in this location, or get some help from some other member of the party so that they get advantage on that strength check. It's the best way to try and get that barred door on the eastern door. I recommend not bothering with the DC 10 wisdom or perception check to listen at the door and hear gruff voices. As long as they state that they are listening at the door, that should be enough. Provided the 5 bugbears don't surprise the party, the player's characters should be fine engaging in a fight with these monsters. Bugbears are at their greatest strength when they surprise the enemy, and the last thing you want is them to be surprising anybody. So I think you'll find in most cases that's very, very unlikely. It's more likely it's going to be the other way around. Now, if they want to intimidate, persuade, or bribe the bugbears, it's not very plausible. Now, why? Because they're probably very loyal to Nesna, and they also relish violence. So if you try to intimidate them, they're just going to go into the fight, and they won't mind in the slightest. As for trying to bribe them, that's not going to necessarily work because they are so loyal, and then persuading them, it depends on what they're trying to do. But tricking the bugbears into leaving the barracks or convincing them that they are red brands, the player characters are red brands sent from by Glassstaff, might be possible. It's entirely possible that one of the bugbears may have informed Glassstaff of the location of Wave Echo Cave, even though the Black Spider probably would have tried to keep that information away from Glassstaff, just in case he decided to make a move on it. So just consider that. Now, Area 12, this is the Smelter cavern. Now, the Smelter cavern is way over here. It's got the billows and the furnace, and it's full of zombies, and it's got a flaming skull. It's a big location. It's quite complicated. It's got quite a few entry points, so they can come from many sort of pretty much east, north, south, west. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of different ways to get into here. Now, when they get here, I want you to read out or paraphrase the box text as always. Also, make sure to ask them what they want to do. That's really important. The key thing with this location to remember is that there is a flaming skull here. Flaming skulls are notoriously difficult to deal with. They are the sorts of things that take down entire parties. Provided they know what they're doing and have a good approach, they'll be fine. If they don't, it'll probably unwind on them. I've found more disasters occur with the flaming skull than pretty much any other monster I've ever run. It's the one thing that throws them. And the key reason being, it's fireball. The thing can hurl a fireball at you. And because it can hurl a fireball at you, it can hurt really, really badly when they do that. So we don't really want to make things worse for them, but they have to deal with this in some way. So role-playing the Flaming Skull is on page 46 of the adventure, but you'll find the monster manual on page 134 has better advice, or you could just play the Flaming Skull as a mad, laughing, Joker-like character. The most effective way to employ the Flaming Skull offensively for attack is to open with a fireball, then follow with a rolling flaming sphere, which will last a period of time. You can just roll it into the player's characters, and then follow up with firing a fire ray in the additional rounds after that. A flaming skull should be using movement, so you move behind cover of the blast furnace or the bellows, and then using the shield spell for defense. So moving out from cover, taking a shot or casting a spell, moving back behind cover, not necessarily taking the hide action, but at least using the cover so that they can't be targeted unless somebody decides to get up close. Now, a flaming skull, this thing can fly, so that means it's probably going to be about 30 feet up in the air when it is seen, because the cavernous areas are 30 feet high, and it can go it flies, okay? A flaming skull is intelligent, so it could be tricked by a spell-casting dwarf. I'm not saying a spell-casting wizard. I'm going to make it a bit broader than that. A spell-casting dwarf, or even a spell-casting gnome, or a dwarf or gnome who has descent in that in some way. But it's really kind of unlikely that you can deal with a flaming skull by intimidating, persuading, or bribing because of its nature, the nature of a flaming skull, and the ancient instructions that it has been given. But you could certainly try to trick it. And the idea in the adventure that they stipulate is trying to send it back to its realm. There are also 8 zombies. These things can't be reasoned with, so the best way to deal with them is to either use the Turn Undead ability, destroy them as best you can with the Paladin's Smite, or surprisingly, Sacred Flame cantrip. It's often coined Sacred Miss, but Sacred Flame is the perfect tool for a zombie. It actually works far more efficiently simply because zombies have a really bad dexterity saving throw. This is meant to be an extremely deadly combat encounter. If the player characters decide to fight, the area can be avoided, so they do not need to go through here, and they can flee from it if they want to without being chased very far. The zombies won't go very far after them, and the flaming skull won't really pursue them very far either. You might like to include a few silver or gold or platinum or both ingots worth maybe a total of about 100 gold pieces to find in the mining carts. There are some mining carts here. I wouldn't bother with a perception check to actually find them. I wouldn't require the player characters to roll any dice as long as they state that they search the carts for about 10 to 30 minutes. So you're getting them to burn up time rather than randomly guess or gamble on a dice roll. I've never been terribly fond of dice rolls, so that would be my suggestion to you. The next location actually doesn't have very much to it. It's Area 13. Area 13 is this location here. It's sort of right through this location. All of this is 13. And you could always even consider this 13. The thing with this area is just read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. Look, this adventure covers everything you need to know on this location. I don't think there's any need to do anything special with this location. It's fine to have a room that is just a room as a transit room with nothing particularly special. The minerals in the ceiling, they don't have any special wealth or properties. If you want to add that, of course you can. All right, now Area 14, which is the Wizard's Quarters. This is Area 14 right here. Area 14 is probably one of the key locations in the entire adventure. For those of you who are unaware, this location is incredibly important, and you do want to make sure you prepare in some way for it. And the reason being is that we're going to be facing off against a wraith, a particular character in the adventure that has a lot of importance called Mormisk. Mormisk the Wraith is going to be in this location. One of the things you'll find about location is it's not like the standard monster in the monster manual. So I will explain. I've just used this miniature here for Mormisk, but role-playing Mormisk the Wraith is on page 47 of the adventure. There's also a video on my YouTube channel which explains how to role-play Mormisk, or you could just play Mormisk as a heartless, greedy banker, because he kind of is very much like that. Mormisk can be bribed, persuaded, or potentially deceived by the player's characters with the right approach. Suggested in the adventure is that anything magical or magically related is probably something he's interested in. And so that's where you want to go in terms of bribing Mormisk. Intimidating Mormisk is it's disastrous. It will result in the Wraith attacking. I recommend not bothering with the DC 10 charisma or persuasion check when trying to bribe Mormisk. They only need to offer a suitable gift. You've got to remember that a DC 10 is an easy check. So why are you bothering to roll it? You can if you want, but I wouldn't bother. One of the strange things you may notice or may not notice is that the Mormisk Wraith stat block is different to the standard Wraith stat block in the Monster Manual for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. The key feature that is different is that the incorporeal movement is not the same. What you'll find is that the incorporeal movement is actually better for Mormisk. Mormisk is not slowed down. Mormisk can move extremely quickly because he can fly. But the thing is, he's not slowed down. His movement is not halved. That incorporeal movement is significantly better. Although the Mormisk can't stop in a solid object or inside a creature, you can move your full distance. That means you can move Mormisk 60 feet. You can get Mormisk in and out of that room very easily by going through a door or a wall. And there's not much that the players can really do because the creature is incorporeal. Now, I know you're probably going to start asking, well, what's the deal? What about opportunity attacks if Mormisk decides to move out of an engaged location? It doesn't really matter because Mormisk can move 60 feet and through anything. So by all means, let the player characters make attacks, but you're going to use the disengage action and move 60 feet. So you can get Mormisk out of that location and bring back this character later on if you desire which you might find is probably more suitable to you rather than just doing what you know, fighting to the death is not really that interesting sometimes. Okay, so there's other aspects to the Mormisk Wraith stat block that you want to just pay attention to. So try not to just use the standard Wraith stat block. Now, there's a whole lot of magical tomes, books that remain on the shelves, and the adventure doesn't tell you anything about what those books are. So I'm going to give you 5 books that you could use. These are the titles that you could have on that shelf. They don't actually have any hugely significant magical effect. They often just impart information, or if they're not imparting information, they offer a very minor temporary bonus, or in some cases, a disadvantage. They can cause problems for the player characters as well. You'll find all the information you need on these books by just Googling it. So the first one is the Tome of Dogmatic Method. So the Tome of Dogmatic Method. The next one is the Book of Change. The next one would be the Seven Fingers book. Seven Fingers is what it's normally called. Then there's the Tome of Garden Flowers and the Tome of the Full. The Tome of the Full is probably the most dangerous of the books because it can potentially wind up changing the character into a jester. So if your player character did not really want to wind up as a jester or a comic or a clown of some kind, then don't put this in your adventure because that's what it's likely to do when they start perusing it. Now, the mysterious map is intended to be something the Dungeon Master creates or repurposes from a short pre-made adventure. It doesn't need to be a really long one. It can be used after the main adventure, and essentially that's its intention. They get this map, and then you can use that to create your own adventure, homebrew it, or use something else that you find on the internet to engage the players and continue your campaign in some way. So that is Area 14 with Mormisk. Now, Area 15. Area 15 is just above 14. This location right here. Area 15 is an odd location. I know a lot of people kind of consider Area 15 to be the key location in the entire complex. This is the Forge of Spells. This is what everybody's pursuing. This is what Nesna the Black Spider wants. This is what everybody is pursuing. It is the most important aspect of this location, even though it doesn't have Nesna the Black Spider here. As a result of it, it has a guardian. This guardian is probably one of the more dangerous guardians that you can include in any adventure. And feel free to consider this more of a role play encounter rather than a battle, because a battle with a spectator is not an easy encounter. But then again, everybody has got to learn the hard way, and it's really up to you as a dungeon master what you think is appropriate for your players. Okay, so a breakdown. When they enter this location, read out or paraphrase the box text as normal. Ask the players what they want to do, but you are going to engage them fairly quickly, and I'll explain why. Role-playing this deranged spectator is on page 48 of the adventure. The monster manual on page 30 has a much better series of advice on how to play it out or play a spectator. Or you could just play it like a delusional, forgetful Jack Nicholson. If you've ever seen the actor Jack Nicholson, that's the kind of individual I think the spectator is. Or pick something else if you think it doesn't seem appropriate. The spectator wants to talk with anybody that it encounters, as long as they don't interfere with the spectator's guard duty. As long as they don't take anything, they don't attack, they don't interfere with the room, and they engage in a conversation, the spectator will talk to them telepathically, and it wants to do so. Now, why does it want to talk so much? Because it's very lonely. It's been here a long time. A spectator is not like your normal beholder. It's a very different creature and monster, and so it behaves very differently. So you can persuade the spectator. You could deceive it to a point, not completely. It's not like it's going to leave this location if you say, oh, you should go this way. It's not going to work. But there is a point where you can deceive it. Intimidating the spectator will just result in it either giving the player characters a warning or attacking the party if things go into aggressive negotiations. The most effective way to employ a spectator is to have it flying near the 20-foot high ceiling and targeting spellcasters or ranged attacks with the eye rays. Don't forget about the bite. Don't worry about the bite. The eye rays are what are really important. The best strategy for dealing with a spectator is to use ranged attacks, because you probably won't be able to get up and melee with it, not unless you've got a reach weapon. Being roughly 6 foot high and then having a reach of about 5 foot, you're only really getting as high as 10 foot, and this thing can fly 20 foot off the floor. So your melee characters are not going to be able to touch it. So that means that ranged attacks are going to be really important. And you also probably want to avoid using magic spells, any kind of magic spell. Now, why? Primarily because this creature can reflect magic spells, whether that's a saving throw magic spell or a magic spell that has an attack roll. It reflects magic, and you don't want to be messing with that. Player characters will most likely try and ask to repair the magical brazier of green flame that's in here. This is what makes items temporarily magical. Don't get suckered in or bullied by your players. Please don't get suckered in or bullied, because you will regret allowing this magical brazier of green flame to permanently make something magical. Because all you're going to wind up happening is the players will come back with a truckload of weapons and start passing them through the brazier so that they can get anything they want. So you don't want to do that. For those of you who are wondering how to approach that, that's the best way, okay? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the idea of saying yes is actually a bad idea. Sometimes you do, in fact, have to say no. Next, area 16, this is the Booming Cave. The Booming Cave is an odd location. It's way over here. It's a large area. There's a lot of water here, and there's not actually an awful lot going on here, frankly. I would say to you that read out, paraphrase the box text for this location, ask the players what they want to do. The booming waves sound, that booming sound that you hear, this is the waves crashing up against the sort of encampment, this little cliff face here. So that noise through the cave originates from this cavern, okay? It will likely affect any creature's ability to hear voices and movement in the whole cave complex, right through to Area 1, all the way through, because that noise is so loud. But in this location, you're probably going to find you can't hear a thing. So walking into this location, it won't matter if you yell out. You probably couldn't hear yourself yelling in this cavern because the waves make so much noise. Now, it is intermittent, so it's not like it's going on all the time, but you've also got to remember it's a cave, so the sound will be echoing and bouncing around the walls. So essentially, you wind up with this permanent noise or din, and then a big loud noise across the top of that when the waves actually strike. It kind of makes sense that the sound from the crashing waves impacts all perception checks negatively for hearing creatures talking, fighting, or moving throughout the cave complex. So you might want to apply disadvantage or automatic failure when using a perception check to hear somebody talking or moving in the cave area. Not just this one, but all of them. Up to you, though. The dead end passageway, which is right here on this location, this dead end passageway coming off the cavern to the south, it has a thin wall section, you'll notice. That could be broken down with a pick or a large hammer to access Area 12. I don't know that there's necessarily any significant reason to do so, but if the player characters decide they want to do that, they could. And for them, unless you're sort of revealing the entire map, it's also sort of an opportunity for them, like, there's an unfinished section. Maybe if we bash through it, we'll find something else. That's really up to you, but it basically allows them to push through to Area 12. Okay, The next section, this is number 17. This is the old stream bed. It's way over here. It's this area here. It's basically this section right there. There's really not much to it. I would read out or paraphrase the box text for this, ask the players what they want to do. This is one of 2 routes that can be used by the player characters to avoid the Smelter cavern with the zombies and the flaming skull. These zombies and the flaming skull are in this location. If you want to avoid them, you go through this area here and use that that passageway. Another way to avoid it completely is to come up through here, through this area, to avoid the scum, the zombies and the flaming skull, and come through from the south. That's another route that you can use to avoid it completely, so you don't have to deal with it getting around that location. There is another route, of course, but that's essentially what it's there. It's there to circumvent those the zombies and the flaming skull. The adventure covers this area pretty well. There's really not an awful lot to say about it. Nothing that you'll find terribly complicated or confusing. Next, we have Area 18. Area 18 is over here. This is the collapsed cavern. It's quite a large area, as you'll notice. It's got multiple levels to it, and it has a number of different creatures in this location. Creatures which will probably cause you a little bit of trouble. I wouldn't say a huge amount of trouble, but enough to be a pain if you don't know what you're doing. Again, you do not need to engage in a battle or combat if you don't want to. There are other ways of dealing with things like that. And I recommend, and I highly I do recommend that you employ a different method. If the players will engage with you trying a different rather than just killing stuff, then try to follow on with that if you can. So Area 18, the collapsed caverns. Read out or paraphrase the box text when they enter here. Ask the players what they want to do. A lot of the things in this location are going to just happen anyway, whether the players decide to do something or not. But you still ask them. They may have a chance to do something before things get complicated. This cavern acts as a major access point for the party as they explore. There are many passageways that lead off it, going into different locations. Try to ensure the players are aware of all the passageways they could select, so that they know that they have more than one choice, that there isn't just one choice moving out of this location when they want to. Role-playing Velark, the doppelganger, is on page 49 of the adventure. There's also a video on my YouTube channel that covers the doppelgangers, and you're welcome to go and check that out. Or just play this doppelganger as an undercover spy. So you're pretending to be somebody else. It should be pretty obvious that you just play it as if you are whatever you have selected to be. And in this case, it's a drow. The doppelganger and the bugbears in this area could be persuaded or deceived by the player characters. Say dressing up in the red brand cloaks, a little bit of makeup might solve a lot of your problems, provided that most of your party is humanoid or humans, or even halflings. I think you will struggle if you have selected some unusual races. If the party has unusual races, it could be a bit tricky, but that's really up to you. You can change anything as a dungeon master, depending on the method employed. If they employ a good method, then allow them to make this work. Bribing or intimidating the bugbears will not work, as they will most likely be loyal again to Nesna the Black Spider, and also they relish violence, as I've said. But the doppelganger is different. The doppelganger, bribing won't work, but intimidating the doppelganger will probably result in the doppelganger being scared off and fleeing to Nesna the Black Spider. And then you can use that doppelganger in the final encounter with the big boss, which is Nesna. Area 19, the Temple of Dumathoin, a terrible name, frankly. But this is where we start facing the major villain. This is what it's all been leading up to. All that work you've put in, this is where you want it to all work for you and be effective. And I'm going to say right now that, frankly, I found this encounter to be one of the worst encounters to run, because there's either so much going on or there's not enough going on. and level 4 characters are still pretty powerful. And a wizard makes an excellent target. It's like it's the one thing everybody knows to target first. And that's what your players are probably going to do, is they're going to target Nesna the Black Spider first over everything else in the room, no matter what. So read out or paraphrase the box text and ask the players what they want to do when they get here. Role-playing Nesna the Black Spider is on page 49 to 50, and there's also a video on my channel that covers this particular character, Nesna. Or you could just play Nesna if you want to be really, really simple about it. It's just I would select a James Bond villain. Any James Bond villain that you remember from those movies, just play Nesna like that. If the doppelganger that retreated to this area from the previous area, instead of the doppelganger assuming the guise of Nundro Rockseeker, one of Gundren's brothers, instead of disguising itself as a dwarf, you might like to select Nesna. Now, the reason for doing this is this will confuse the players and give the Black Spider a better chance of living past round 1. I find that usually players will target Nesna first, and because Nesna has so few hit points, and that because they're playing at level 4, they can truck out enough damage to kill Nesna in less than 1 round if everybody uses ranged attacks or gets close enough to do so. And if they roll really good on their initiative and they get surprised, then there's not an awful lot that Nesna can do. Even if Nesna does get a chance to act, it's probably not going to matter. 1 round, Nesna is gone if they target and focus fire on Nesna. Now, the reason for having the doppelganger assume the identity of Nesna is then you have 2 Nesna characters they have to select from. So now they have to decide who do they think is the one they need to target. It's that switch and bait technique that we often use as magicians or dungeon masters, is give them more than 1 target, and then they have to try to figure out which is the correct target. Now, rather than Nesna casting the invisibility spell first, which the adventure states, I think that's a bad idea. The best thing you can do if Nesna gets a chance to cast any spell, and frankly is probably the only spell you need to really worry too much about, is casting Darkness, the darkness spell. Nesna can cast the spell. It will hinder the player characters much more. Their visibility will be affected. Even in with dark vision, they cannot see through magical darkness. Nobody can. It means it puts the player characters at a huge disadvantage. Including webs or spider webs on the floor, walls, and ceilings will make it much easier for the giant spiders in this location to track the players and any kind of movement using that web sense in the magical darkness, because the magical darkness will also affect the dark vision of the giant spiders. They only have blind sight up to 10 feet, which is probably not close enough. So what this will mean is they can web up the player characters and attack them unseen. Now, if you're unseen, you get advantage. The web sense will give them a sort of a pinpoint location, provided they are moving up against webbing. So on the floor, on the walls, on the ceiling, and stringing a few lines across the room as well, that can be broken by any character, and also potentially your own NPCs as well. That's probably the best way you'll find, even if you wind up with your bugbears having disadvantage on attacks and trying to figure out where the enemy is. It's got a much better chance of Nesna lasting outside of just 1 round if it gets fired off. This mage should already have mage armor cast on them. Okay, if you don't have mage armor cast, make sure you have. Now, by doing the darkness spell, Nesna can now question the player characters in the middle of a fight covered with this magical darkness, then cast a spell. So you ask a question, cast a spell, not necessarily at a target because you won't be able to see anything, but maybe on yourself if you need to, and then move and then use the heavy obscurity as cover. And you don't need to worry about taking the hide action or using an action to do this, because you can't see anything. Nobody can. It's an unusual way to engage a battle, but it's probably the best way to engage this battle. Any other way, you'll probably find they're going to get pulverized pretty quickly. There is mention of 2 bugbears in the box text for this location if the NPCs are unaware of player characters, which you can add to the fight even though it's not actually in the adventure in bold. You'll notice that most of the monsters are usually listed in bold in a section, and this is one time when that doesn't happen. So I think this is optional. I think these 2 bugbears are really up to you. You do not need to include them. It's completely up to you. If you do include the 2 bugbears and you have the four giant spiders and you have Nesna in here and you've got a doppelganger, it's going to be an extremely deadly fight. It's going to be an extremely deadly fight anyway. Just with that setup, you'll find that the players will struggle. I recommend not bothering with the strength check of DC 10 to pry the jewel loose from the statue. Just if they try to climb up there, fine, and they try to pry it free, fine, they do it, it's all good. A DC 10 is an easy check. It's a waste of your time. You've got better things to do with your time than mucking around with that. So don't even go there. The very last location is where we have been leading up to. We've been trying to get to this point for quite some time. We were supposed to rescue somebody in particular, right? And that's the dwarf. That's the dwarf that is the brother of Gundren Rockseeker. And if you're going to do this in Area 20, this is the priest's quarters. Now, the priest's quarters are right next to the main location where Nesna is, okay, in the temple. But I would still read out or paraphrase the box text for this location, ask the players what they want to do. You have to decide whether Nundro Rockseeker is still alive. If too much time has passed, you might decide that Nundro gets killed. That's fine. It should be possible to rescue Nundro Rockseeker from the quarters, okay, from the priest's quarters, without alerting anyone if the party is stealthy. I'm going to suggest a stealth check of DC 15 and taking the right opportunity to move up the stairs, or looking around the corner to make sure nobody's watching from the temple, and then making their way into the door, through the door. You're going to have to make sure you don't bash it down. You're going to have to pick that lock, and then once you get through, because getting the key off Nesna the Black Spider, that's not going to be stealthy. You're not going to be doing that, not without having a fight. But it is possible to get hold of Nundro without engaging in a battle and get him out safely if you wanted to. And I wouldn't make that too difficult. I think it'll work perfectly fine. Okay, so there are a couple of house chore things to discuss. I would say there are 3 points that I'm going to cover. Some of these have been suggested by other people in the past, but I'm also going to suggest a couple of different things as well. First off, dealing with the aftermath of defeating Nesna and rescuing Nundro Rockseeker. Even if the player characters don't rescue the Rockseeker Nundro, it's all fine. At some point, the adventure will come to a conclusion because they have either had to defeat Nesna or been defeated by Nesna, which is entirely possible. And if that happens, then I would suggest to you either end your campaign or you go with you were all captured and proceed from there. Again, this is something that a dungeon master needs to decide themselves. It's like, what do I want to do at this point? Do I want to continue on, or should we just bring it to an end? The adventure covers this pretty well, wrapping it all up, the aftermath. But if you want to add some complexity to your adventure, I want you to consider having Loth, the demon queen of spiders, turn the dead or alive Nesna into a Drider for failing. One of the punishments that Loth engages in, particularly with male drow, and particularly with those that she deems to be worthy of her attention, is if they fail, and often she will set a task for them so they deliberately fail so that they can be turned into a Drider. This is what I would suggest. Now, I'm not saying that Nesna is turned into a Drider straight after they kill Nesna. No. Wait until the body has sort of been left or buried, and then it rises as a Drider as a result of the demon queen of spiders bringing his body back to life and transforming him into this horrible thing. Or if Nesna is captured and is still alive and then put into a cell, then Nesna could later on turn into a Dryder, escape, and then you can now use Nesnar the Dryder as a returning villain later in your campaign to really make things a little bit more different. I guess this is a little bit like using Darth Maul from Star Wars. If any of you have ever watched the original movie that had Darth Maul in it, and then the follow-up TV series, this is kind of what we're looking for. The treasure in Wave Echo Cave is perfectly adequate, but adding consumable potions or scrolls will not significantly undermine your game if you continue. Awarding experience points for monsters. You can kill them, you can defeat them, you can drive them off, you can bribe them, or they can flee. That all gives you experience points if you're using experience points. The players should be level 5 or gain another milestone after completing this location if they were successful. And success is essentially gaining control. So I know a few people like the idea of only dealing with Nesnar and not dealing with all the other threats, but the idea is that you keep coming back and dealing with everything that's here, clear out all the undead. Again, you can decide to sort of forget all that if you want to, but the idea is this is a reward. And so part of the reward process is having to do the hard yakka, which is to clear an area completely so that you can use it for mining and for the spell forger's abilities, which may actually wind up drawing a lot of attention.